Hello, everyone. Welcome back to This Week in Privacy. This is our weekly series at Privacy Guides where we cover the latest updates with what we're working on within the Privacy Guides community and this week's top stories in the data privacy and cybersecurity space. If you don't know about who we are and what we do, Privacy Guides is a nonprofit which researches and shares privacy related information, and we facilitate a community on our forum and on Matrix and other platforms where people can ask questions and get advice about staying private online and preserving their digital rights. So, before we dive into this week's show, I'll give you a quick rundown of how the show's typically laid out. We start out by covering site updates, what we're working on as a team, and then we will move on to talking about the top stories that we've seen in the news in privacy and cybersecurity. Then we'll take a look at some trending posts that we've seen from our community, and we will answer any questions that you have. So, if you have a question for us, leave it in our forum thread for this live stream or leave it in the YouTube chat, and we will be sure to answer it during the show. We have a bit of a different setup today. Normally, I can get Jordan to help out with a lot of this, but Jordan couldn't make it this week. But have no fear because I'm joined by our excellent community and news intern, Kevin, today. Kevin, how are you doing?
Doing pretty well.
Good.
As you know, Jordan is gone, so I'm here to help fill in, help share a lot of the amazing things we've been working on a day-to-day basis. Um, Anyways, Jonah is made here again and again and again. Child control is coming back, or may not come back. We don't really know. But as what we do know, however, is that it is still looming on the horizon. Uh, very recently, uh, Denmark has withdrawn a lot of the things that made child control what it is. But however, I really want to emphasize that it will be a recurring topic over the next few years, and to never have any sort of fatigue when advocating against it. We're determined to put on a video covering the subject, and even if the European Parliament has moved to delay or not ignore mandatory child control, we need to recognize that European citizens must have their voices heard and contact MEPs to remove all other aspects of the legislation as well. There are many sorts of things in it as well, including, if not limited to, the banning of anonymous communication and the increase of voluntary chat control, where various services are encouraged to do so on their own volition, sort of normalizing the concept, which should not be done. Additionally, we're working on a threat modeling course to guide people through making logical and sound decisions on what privacy is here tool should be utilized for. This will be a multi-part series because of the complexities of the topic. However, just to let you know, scripting for this series has been mostly completed, and now Jordan is ready to just dive deep into production to bring it to you as soon as possible. So hopefully this course will be out very soon, and we're honestly all really excited to see it. Anyways, I'd love to pass on towards site development updates to Jonah.
Yeah, we have a lot of stuff going on at Privacy Guides. In addition to that stuff that Jordan's working on, I'm super excited to see all that video stuff coming out, and hopefully, Jordan will be able to share a bit more about all of that with you all next week. But if you haven't seen in our on our forum and in our community, we've put out a call to hire somebody else to help out with the video stuff, and luckily, we have narrowed down that selection, and the new candidate will be starting out very soon. Actually, as soon as next week, they'll be beginning to get some work done. We'll keep it a bit under wraps about who they are and what they're doing for now, but I hope that we will have more to share about that in the future because I'm super excited for what that's going to mean for our channel here in 2026. Um, Other than that, just doing a lot of prep behind the scenes for uh, our merch store. If people are interested in supporting us that way, M has been doing some great work with designing some potential products that we're going to be posting. So that's another thing that we hope to be able to share soon. But I know people have been interested in more things like shirts or stickers from us, so you can support the work that we're doing and talk about privacy with other people. Um, Other than that, a lot of stuff that we still have to keep secret, unfortunately, but it will be coming soon. So yeah, hopefully in the next few episodes we'll have a lot more to share. But there is a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that I'm super excited about. And there's always a ton of discussions on our forum as far as site development updates, new things to recommend, new tools coming out. We're evaluating a ton of different stuff right now. If you have any uh, privacy related tools that are new that have come out that you like, definitely let us know about them, because that's kind of the whole point of the project, right? Is to make sure we can promote these tools and get as many people to switch to private alternatives as possible. But yeah, I think that's all I really have to share. So why don't we move on to some of the news stories we have here? Um, our first story comes from Politico, and the headline is EU officials' location data is for sale, report says. The European Commission recognizes the worrying conclusions of the media outlets' investigation. Um, so I know I believe you added this article to the notes. Did you have anything that you wanted to highlight before we get into this at all, Kevin?
Oh, of course. So, as you may know, data brokers, they hoard and steal all your data. And the one thing we really hate from data brokers is that not only do they tend to get breached a lot by hackers and having all of your, quote unquote public available information released out to the internet for scammers to call you, annoy you constantly. However, this public information could be used to profile you. This public information could be used to harass you. And people also include government officials. At least what I know from this political article, essentially what it's trying to say is that EU government officials have been discovered within like these databases that these data brokers have. And while there isn't really a lot of things we have covered in the past about European specific data brokers, I think this article really did shed a light on how, yes, Europeans, despite the fact you have the GDPR um, helping you delete your data brokers still do exist and they can harm you. Regardless of your status or where you work, they could be easily used to target you, especially for those very keen on the whole OSINT rabbit hole or harassment, whatever you call it nowadays. I'm just going to briefly read over the first few paragraphs of this article. So, the anonymous location data of EU officials in Brussels is up for sale, according to a joint investigation by European media outlets. Three senior officials working for the EU were identified as part of an investigation into phone location data being sold by data brokers. Other phones were located in NATO sites and Belgian military bases. Wow, very, very confidential. The European Commission has recognized the worrying conclusions of the investigation and, as a result, told investigating outlets that has issued new guidance to its staff regarding ad tracking settings on businesses and home devices and has informed other EU entities. I really hope they include privacy guides in these guidelines, but we shall see about that. But, anyways, getting back on topic, the investigation was conducted by L'Echo, Le Monde, German public broadcasters, netzpolitik.org, and BNR News Radio. Pardon my German here, but journalists posed undercover as employees at a marketing company and were able to obtain hundreds of millions of location data points from phones in Belgium through data brokers. Data brokers, as we already said, they sell aggregated databases of personal information gathered through mobile apps, online web trackers, and they're often resold to advertisers, but even law enforcement and government officials themselves. And while this location data is supposed to be anonymous, it could definitely be used to track down people, paint a picture of someone's daily movements. And then when you combine this other anonymous data, you can actually identify someone. So something to keep in mind here is that the data is technically anonymous, but what happened was a bunch of journalists were able to comb through the ranks and we realized, okay, according to the movements of this person at a specific military base, we can tell that it is this specific European Union official, which I feel it's a lot more scarier than having public information accessible on the internet. Um, so, Jonah, what do you know about at least this method of tracking people? Would you say, even when like your name isn't really like attached to this data point, how could a bunch of random data points be used to like identify you? Like, is this like what you call user profiling or
Yeah,
fingerprinting?
absolutely. This is definitely a thing that we've seen before in other cases. The one that comes to mind for me is a story a few years ago about how um, foreign militaries were tracking U.S. military officials using Strava because they could because they would map out like runs around military bases, and they could learn um, top secret things about those facilities based on that public information that those people were sharing. In this case, it's a really interesting story if you if you haven't read it yet, any of you, because it was a investigation that was conducted by a lot of different journalists, as you said, and what they basically did is pose as marketing companies and tried to obtain all of this information from data brokers. All of this information is obtained through a wide variety of ways. So it can include information that's gathered via mobile apps that you use. We see a lot of mobile apps that developers include analytics or tracking SDKs that can kind of track what you do and profile you that way. A lot of the times, I mean, in some cases, we even see developers being paid to add these tracking services to their apps, and that's a way that they monetize that by selling that data. And this data also comes from online web trackers. So that's across the web. It could be a variety of different ways. I don't know the specific networks that were used to collect this data in particular, but it's the case with any of these advertising networks and tracking networks and website analytics networks that are used for a variety of purposes, whether it's to just learn more about your site as a developer or to monetize your site with advertisements. That's the concern that I think people in the privacy community have been talking about for years now, ever since these like global third-party ad networks came out. It provides them with a ton of information about your browsing habits and everything else that you do on the web, and it really ties it together. And I think people are just maybe not as um or they're more unique than you might expect. I think a lot of people think, it doesn't really matter if a website knows that I visited this other site or that I read the news on Politico or CNN or whatever, or that I bought a certain thing online from Amazon. All of those things stand alone, it might not reveal a lot about you, but when all of those things are added together and when they collect this amount of data, um, at a certain point, it really narrows down to a scary level of detail, a ton of information about you, and it's absolutely personally identifiable at some point, and that's why these data brokers exist. So this is probably a problem that we've seen occur more in the US, but this shows that even privacy laws in the EU can't protect people in some cases. So, uh, yeah, it's I would agree with the assessment that they said that this was a worrying case. And hopefully, because this affected EU lawmakers, maybe that will be the motivation that they need to take action against this stuff because it is scary stuff, I think.
It's so scary. I'm surprised they haven't been banned across the world. But hey, uh, we love not regulating things.
Right?
Even in the EU, though, right? Like they've actually taken a lot of actions quite recently. At least in the article, like I noticed that Ireland has actually suspended activities of a data broker, which is pretty much unheard of in the United States. Um, and despite that, positive, right? Data brokers are still prevalent across the world, even when you're behind laws that are supposed to protect your privacy, right? And if you're going to use something like a GDPR, a lot of it empowers autonomy of your data. You must know where your data is collected. You must be able to send that email to that company saying, I do not want my data stored into your website. Please delete it. Very easy, very quick. And the fact of the matter is that the GDPR, while doing a lot for allowing people to retain control over your data, you must be able to know that your data has been collected in the first place. And it's really hard to know when a lot of these apps like hide everything behind these terms and conditions, and you must be able to look at the permissions on your phone and saying, okay, which app is collecting my location data on my phone. No one really cares or to even read into that. So this is why I feel like yes, the GDPR is very important. It is not infallible, and unless you take active precautions to secure, the data you're sending to other services, you might as well just not even have the GDPR with you. We gotta be able to know that your data is being sent and to use it effectively. I'd say.
Yeah.
I guess the difference though is like at least in the US, not is that we don't actually have anything unless you live in certain states or jurisdictions. So at least I can say like obviously I'd rather be European in this whole dilemma and all that. But remember take personal control of your data, look through our recommendations, and try to do something about it. I think it would be nice to know what are you actually setting to these companies, and you never know whether you're setting, let's say, your actual location data or just something as simple as your name or your height, other pieces I can't recollect. Um,
Absolutely. The GDPR is an interesting case because in reality, it does allow a lot of this data to be collected. It's perfectly legal. The nice thing about it is that it gives people a lot of um, consent-based options. So in this case, to collect data from mobile phone users, um, people have to consent and they have to be informed about how their data is used, and that's obviously a huge improvement over something in the United States, for example. In the United States, like you said, it is a bit of a wild west in terms of data privacy, unfortunately, especially when it comes to restricting corporations. If anyone listening to this is interested in learning more about data brokers in the US, Jordan just released a few weeks ago an incredible video on data brokers and how to opt out of some of those services on our YouTube channel. So you should definitely check that out after the stream if this is a topic that interests you. In the EU, all of these data protection laws are kind of a double-edged sword. I would say they're definitely a net benefit and much better than the US again. But part of the problem is that because of the GDPR, still allowing a lot of these data brokers to exist, but they might not be able to share this information. You don't actually see a lot of your data publicly exposed necessarily. In the US, people can often Google their own name and their city or Google their phone number, and some of the first results are going to be from data broker sites. And that is less common in the EU because of these privacy laws. But as we see in this article, these data brokers are still collecting that data behind the scenes and you might not be aware of it. And I think that's its own concern. And it's harder to opt out if you if you don't know where your data is in the first place. I think that's the main issue that we would probably highlight from this article compared to the data broker information that we have on our website and in Jordan's latest video. It's that this data is still out there if you're in the EU. In a lot of cases, you just have less recourse. But I do hope that um, some investigations like this and uh, improve the situation, and I hope that some action takes place.
yes, indeed. One more question before we move on to the next article. Um, Given the state of data brokers in the US, though, like we know they can search your name up and then use some data broker to gain access to that information about that name. I was just wondering though, has there been any sort of incidents where it's possible to harass someone or target someone using the information you get from quote unquote public sources, such as these data brokers?
Absolutely. I mean, this. By the way, I saw in the chat somebody mentioned the audio was a bit quiet. I turned it up a bit, so let me know if this changes anything for you. Um, that definitely does happen. In a lot of the times you'll see it reported in the news when it happens to somebody notable. So we see stories about YouTubers or streamers being targeted by stalkers, and people are able to find their personal information and their address um, from data broker sites like these and from people search sites, and it places real people in danger. This is a real problem for a lot of people who deal with stalkers or in potentially abusive or violent situations. um, you just don't see a lot of that reported on in the news necessarily because the news media, I think, doesn't report on a lot of things that happen to people who aren't very notable in their eyes. So a lot of that
Mm,
flies under the radar. But we can look at these stories about it happening to celebrities or people who are maybe micro celebrities on the internet,
yeah.
and we can expanded upon that to see to imagine how this would affect normal people who might have even less recourse and who might not get reported on at all if they have this problem. It definitely is very common, and we do see um, a lot of cases, especially in like domestic abuse or violent situations where this data um, poses real dangers. And yeah, it's definitely a concern that I think a lot of people should be worried about, and I think there should be more attention on this topic because I think some regulation needs to um, be put in place to rein in these data brokers quite a lot.
Yeah, indeed. There needs to be more liability against these data brokers. No amount of civil litigation or suing a company or breaching our information will stop all of this. It appears that at least in the US, there will be no action, at least in the near future, on data brokers. And we must do our best to make sure that consequences are actually levied against these organizations for sure, or else this will only be worse given that more data will be processed in the near future with the whole AI thing going on right now. But yeah, honestly, I'm concerned. Y'all should be concerned. However, there are still things you can do to safeguard your data. Anyways, I think this is a perfect segue towards like this whole conversation away from harassment and the anonymization into like the topic of cybercrime. Actually, um, here we have an article. The U.S. declines to join more than 70 countries in signing UN cybercrime treaty. Jonah, do you mind reading the article for everyone?
Yeah, so this was reported by The Record. Exactly like you said, the US declines to join um, 70 countries. They say more than 70 countries signed the landmark UN Convention Against Cybercrime in Hanoi this weekend, which is a significant step in the years long effort to create a global mechanism to counteract digital crime. The UK and the European Union joined China, Russia, Brazil, Nigeria, and dozens of other nations in signing the convention, which lays out new mechanisms for governments to coordinate, build capacity, and track those who use technology to commit crimes. Um, right off the bat about this story, it's not super surprising to me that the US wouldn't join in because I do think the US tends to avoid a lot of these international efforts. The US notably isn't a part of Interpol, for example, which is probably a similar type of organization. And so the fact that they aren't committing to working with other countries it is not surprising to me. Was there anything in this article that stood out to you, Kevin?
Oh, yes, quite a lot. Um, uh, I'm going to quote here. It creates the first global 24/7 network where countries can quickly initiate cooperation, the UN said. It recognizes and promotes the need to build capacity in countries to pursue, cooperate on fast-moving cybercrimes. The convention has been heavily criticized by the tech industry, which has warned that it criminalizes cybersecurity research and exposes companies to legally thorny data requests. And in a rare collaboration with these tech companies, the human rights groups warned on Friday that it effectively forces member states to create a broad electronic surveillance dragnet that will include trends that have nothing to do with technology. And many have expressed concern that the convention will be abused by dictatorships and rogue governments who deploy against critics, protesters, even those outside the regime's jurisdiction. It also creates legal regimes to monitor, store, and allow cross-border sharing of information without specific data protections. Access Now's Ramajit Singh Chima says that the convention effectively justifies cyber authoritarianism at home and transnational oppression across borders. Any countries ratifying the treaty, he adds, risk actively validating cyber authoritarianism and facilitating the global erosion of digital freedoms, choosing procedural consensus over substantive human rights protections. Now, you wouldn't really expect that, from a quote unquote treaty of cybercrime at first, but once you read into the type of countries that signed it, it makes a whole lot of sense. I first want to start by explaining a very vague, like three general models of how countries deal with cybercrime. There is the international collaboration model as espoused by the West, kind of like the US and Europe, where the general strategy is that there is a lot of informal collaboration or formalized collaboration between different law enforcement agencies. And the idea is you will have warrants or Interpol warrants towards different countries, and you'll be able to essentially get these people extradited from a certain country to the offending country and nation in question. Then there's a second model that's more established by authoritarian countries such as Russia and China, which deals a lot with sovereignty, meaning that you want to keep these hackers start hacking into other countries inside your country, and they want to have full jurisdiction on how they are punished, which oftentimes meaning creating them for intelligence agencies. And then there's a third model, which is mostly espoused by the global south, such as some countries in Africa and Southeast Asia, that really want to have their own say on how their cyber criminals operate. and it's not necessarily like reliant on recruiting them for intelligence agencies or extradite them to other countries. They view a lot of these international treaties as as a way to kind of like impose on their sovereignty. So we want to prevent that, obviously. And I guess this is definitely one of the first cybercrime treaties that have been signed ever since the original Budapest Protocol in the 90s, which was the really like uh, limiting treaty that didn't really like do anything besides promising international collaboration, of course. But this UN cybercrime treaty was very concerning because it actually established a framework for countries to essentially punish people outside of the jurisdiction, meaning any country within the signatory could potentially say in a legal request towards, let's say, a journalist or an organization in another country, and then have them essentially be forced to give this data up despite existing outside their jurisdiction. Now, of course, like this has already been happening for quite some time, but the fact that this is starting to become more normalized and in a treaty is quite concerning. And you know, in this rare collaboration between the tech industry and civil rights advocacy organizations, in which like this treaty is concerning, dragnet on our privacy. I'm not particularly surprised that they did end up collaborating on this. Right now, though, like it seems to me that digital sovereignty is starting to take effect, and while it has a lot of positives for digital privacy, especially given the massive like, influence of corporate surveillance, we may see in the future a lot more intelligence sharing among these member countries that did sign this treaty. Um, so I guess it does definitely place into question, how does jurisdiction impact someone's threat model? For example, is
Yeah.
it even important nowadays since like almost every single country is collaborating?
I mean, you bring up an excellent point about this causing problems by like enabling so many people to request information from tech companies. It's going to be um kind of a regulation nightmare for a lot of people who run these tech services because you now have to keep up with all of these laws. It really depends on how this is implemented, but any sort of um, setup like this where countries can maybe bypass jurisdictional issues to submit these requests to tech companies, it's problematic. It's kind of forcing these tech companies to do the government's job, right, and evaluate these requests instead of it going through the normal channels where you are. Like if a German company would probably expect to get a request from a German court, for example, and there's probably some collaboration or coordination between a different country and that German court before that request makes it to the tech company. If this kind of streamlines that process and the signatories of this basically say, all of these requests from all of these other countries that signed on, they're also valid and you need to consider that. That opens it up to a huge potential for abuse. And so it's definitely a concern. I think when it comes to a lot of the stuff that we recommend, we really try and focus on technical protections that can't be backdoored, like strong end-to-end encryption, for example. That's going to provide much more protection than something like the jurisdiction where the service that you're using is. And so, typically in our community, when people recommend things and on our website, we try to avoid these jurisdictional issues because it does take a backseat to um, strong encryption, which can, in theory, shield you from any jurisdiction. So there's no trust required. And I think that that is kind of the future of data security and privacy. If you're concerned about keeping your personal information private, you will need to begin using systems that have no trust required in the first place. That's the shift that we've definitely seen over the last decade. I think. Certainly, back a while ago, like like when Edward Snowden first released all of those documents, like detailing the Five Eyes and all of these other cross-country coordination efforts, um, jurisdiction was a lot more of a concern, and all of this intelligence sharing really impacted a lot of regular people in ways that they didn't necessarily expect, which is why that revelation was so newsworthy at the time. Um, Hopefully, technology has improved a lot since then, but I think there's still a long way to go. And I think for a lot of people whose data isn't protected, this could definitely impact them. So yeah, it's certainly a concern, and I think it's right for the tech industry and for these human rights groups to speak out against this measure that's been introduced in the UN.
Yeah, and one more thing I also want to add to is like cybercrime is such a vague, generalized definition. What is a cybercrime? Um, if the fact that we're talking about this on podcast right now and it violates a few like censorship laws in this country, that doesn't mean we're committing a cybercrime. This is the thing. We don't know what cybercrime is. We just say, oh, it's a crime committed on the internet. Yes, but there's so many avenues to it. Like freedom of speech, censorship, um, you know, buying or selling basic necessities for some people may be completely legal in another country. So there isn't an actual agreed upon standard what is cybercrime, and the fact that we have to like share so much like information like already on the internet and have this information be collected and profiled by our own law enforcement agencies and potentially shared with other countries as well and some vague attempt to get some sort of collaboration on this vague term, mentioning that word quite a lot for a reason. um, it's clear that since no one can agree what is a cybercrime or what violates free speech, I'm a lot more concerned about the things that happen outside of internet encryption. Like, for example, on social media platforms, for example, almost the entirety of social media among a few platforms, be it Facebook, you I'm sure there's others as well, obviously. Uh, uh, oh, wow. One thing that I've also recognized as well is that the fact there's so few like social media platforms out there is that we definitely do need like decentralized alternatives. Um, so I'm just like definitely curious to see whether or not like decentralized alternatives like Mastodon could potentially like be a solution to all this.
I definitely think these federated platforms are great for avoiding censorship in data collection, especially from these big tech companies. Anything that we can do to get away from um, these larger tech companies that act as data collectors or data brokers themselves, it will make a huge difference in terms of people's privacy. It's a tricky situation because, cybercrime obviously, like you said, the definition can change. It can be very arbitrary, which is a problem, but it does generally exist, and the internet has exacerbated some issues like
Mm.
money laundering, for example, especially um, with the rise of cryptocurrency, but certainly also drug use and all that other stuff that maybe some people would consider legitimate to stop. The exact nature of the crime, I think, is less of the issue here, because it kind of ignores the broader issue with these surveillance measures, which is that with all of these proposals and measures that are being put in place, like we see in the EU a lot lately and around the world, what we're doing is giving up long-term safety and privacy of our data and of our information, and we're trading that for some short-term gains. And maybe this does prevent some crime, and maybe some people will justify it based on that. But I don't think you can look at simply, how many criminals a measure stops. You have to look at the broader impact that this is going to have on people who aren't criminals, people who just want their data to be protected. They don't want their data to be leaked, or they don't want to be swept up in data brokers like we just talked about in the last news story, right? All of this stuff is enabled by these mass surveillance tools, and as governments continue to encourage companies and their own agencies to build these tools to spy on their citizens, in the name of preventing crime now, that will have broader impact in the long term, and it will be misused, and it will not be secure. Even if it's not misused, which seems unlikely, all of these tools and systems are going to be susceptible to leaks and breaches that put real people at risk. So I think people really need to draw a line in the sand, right? And just say that these sorts of mass surveillance techniques, regardless of the short-term benefits that they may provide in the eyes of the governments or even in the eyes of people, um we we can't just give that up I mean, we can't just accept that and give up um this long-term broader protection of our data and privacy. We need to make sure that we continue to hold on to, our independence and our data. So that would be my biggest concern. And yeah, we've seen it in a lot of measures lately. These surveillance tactics coming up. So it's something that people need to keep an eye on and speak out about a bit.
Yeah, of course. Remember, it's never a crime to care about your digital privacy. It's not a crime to protect what little we have left, you know?
Absolutely, yeah.
And it's like the fact that, oh, I use Tor, therefore I'm a criminal, or oh, I use a VPN, therefore I'm downloading, illegal things. No, that's not necessarily the case. And the fact of the matter is that we really need to bridge this gap between the normalization of privacy enhancing technologies like VPNs and make sure that to the public that yes, we're doing this for a reason, and we can't just use and accept the fact that cybercrime is the only way that these states will quash our freedoms. Like we can't accept that. They use so many justifications to do so, and to be frank, cybercrime has always been used this way. And I was just actually wondering, how can we fight against this narrative? Like, is there any way we can do so besides just somehow convincing a lot of people to use VPNs more often? Like, is there any way we can reach this sort of normalization?
Yeah, that's something that we've been talking a lot about behind the scenes, creating resources to to help people kind of share more about why this is a problem and to give people advice on what to do about it exactly. I think definitely educating yourself as much as you can about how to keep your data safe, how to follow best cybersecurity practices. I think that helps quite a lot. And if you need specific advice, I would definitely recommend people join our forum and ask about their particular situation because it's going to be different for everyone, what you can do in your particular situation. Some people can do more than others, and some people have more to lose than others, and so it does kinda come down to a case-by-case basis, but I do know that, our staff writer, M, is working on a ton of stuff related to this, and we hope to have more to share along those lines very soon, but we are still working on that. So definitely stay tuned, I would say, because that is an excellent question that we want to get answered and it's super important to discuss. And in the meantime, I would tell people to join our community.
Mm. Indeed, we're trying to normalize, caring about
Yeah.
this topic in the first place, and it's hard, like network effect, but eventually we'll get there. It'll just take time, and ironically, as more of these horrible regulations come to effect, just age verification and whatnot, I think there'll be a lot more people using these services and trying to go down the rabbit hole and realize, oh wait, this is not normal, and this shouldn't be normal. Um, Speaking of things that should not be normal, I want to pivot to another article about, well, an amazing Chrome feature, which I feel like we cover once every 2 weeks or so. Always browsers adding horrible features nobody wants. But in this case, it's a feature that a lot of people would like, not necessarily among the privacy conscious community. Um, Chrome can now autofill your passport, driver's license, and vehicle registration info. An article by Aisha Malik in TechCrunch. Google announced on Monday that its Chrome browser can now fill in your passport, driver's license, vehicle registration, and more as part of its autofill feature. The addition expands Chrome's existing ability to automatically fill in your addresses, passwords, and payment information. Desktop users who have enhanced autofill enabled will see their passport and driver's license number, vehicle information, so on and so forth, and more automatically filled in web pages when they're prompted to enter them. Google says Chrome can now better understand complex forms and varied formatting requirements, which will improve accuracy across the web. The tech giant notes that Chrome only saves autofill data when you give it permission to do so, and that this browser will protect this information through encryption Additionally, before Chrome fills in the information on your behalf, it will ask you to conform. And these new updates are available in all languages globally starting Monday, which I believe is that this next upcoming Monday, according
Yeah.
to when this article was published. Um, wow, I mean, okay, I get how it's convenient, and maybe for the average person, it's nice to get through these horrible applications online with telling you to get upload your ID everywhere. But I'm starting to feel like with the whole age verification nonsense going on, I'm just feeling that this could be like a response to the increased need to actually input this information in the first place. Yet another website requesting your driver's license to be placed into all these application forms. And regardless of what you think this encryption could ideally do to help protect your data, um, I just don't want this to be normalized. If you need to fill in your information, get out your ID, and think about where you're actually putting your information at. Because you should not be just giving out your passport or driver's license to people out of nowhere. When you're in public, most likely they will not just keep your driver license number or vehicle registration number forever. They just look at it, confirm it, see if it matches the database, and just move on with their life. But on the
Absolutely.
internet, nothing stays deleted. Nothing.
Yeah, that was my biggest question and concern about this. It definitely normalizes some pretty unsafe privacy practices. The example that Google shows appears to show filling out all of this information during checkout, I believe, for a rental car. My question is mainly like how often do people actually do this? That this is a huge benefit for them, and where is Google getting this information from? Is it something that they ask you to enter and prompt to save, or are they getting this from like their digital ID systems and wallets? I don't believe that's the case right now, but I can imagine that happening pretty soon. And I think it's just a strange system, I think, that we would be encouraging people to enter this sensitive information in basic web forms instead of having a more private system to share this information. Um, Google is also clearly trying to cover more of like what traditional password managers do. A lot of people I think might have this information saved in the password manager that they use, and Google would rather you switch to using their service built into Chrome because what it really does is encourage vendor lock-in. The more data that these companies have, and Google certainly knows that with Chrome, and I think this is definitely a tactic to get people to stay with Chrome because they want to make it as convenient as possible at the expense of having to give all of this information to Google. Overall, to me, it just seems like a strange feature to add. I don't really know how often this is really coming up for people that this is going to make a huge difference in their lives, but it definitely, like you said, normalizes pretty unsafe behavior, and I can definitely see this potentially um, being abused by phishing forums and other less reputable sites to try and get that information automatically, maybe before you realize that it's been autofilled. So yeah, I definitely would avoid this feature. Luckily, I think most people probably aren't using Chrome, but maybe I don't know if we'll see this feature come to other Chromium-based browsers like Brave or whatever.
Mhm.
So we'll see.
Hey, Jonah, what do you feel about certain password managers? Like one password, for example, which already implemented a similar feature where you can autofill um, sensitive photo ID information. I know that's already been implemented in one password. I'm just wondering, should this be recommended in the first place? Why would you think these password managers are trying to do this? Is it just another way for them to improve more features and add up to their change log? Or is there like another sinister reason out there?
Yeah, the nice thing about features like this being included in password managers is that it does make it easy to switch between browsers. That's probably the main
Mm,
reason we tend to recommend using a dedicated password manager instead of using the password manager built into your browser. I know a lot of people like to use or they will use the feature in Chrome or Firefox, and it does provide end-to-end encryption. Depending on how you set it up, that can be more or less secure. than you would expect. But even if you're using that browser password manager, it just makes it a pain to switch to a different browser. And so more of that functionality being modular and being in a product like a password manager um that actually like uh I guess is something that you're paying to protect your data as opposed to Google, which is just kind of providing this feature for free to um, try and convince you to stick with their browser over everything else. I think that makes a big difference, just the business model in general. So it's one thing for a password manager to do it, and it's another thing for a feature like this to show up in Chrome. But even if you can add this information in like one password, for example, I don't think it gets auto-filled right now on
Mm.
websites because well, like we already said, I think that just normalizes dangerous behavior. I think that's what Google is doing here, and I think that this will definitely impact people. I saw Jordan in the chat just said this feature could be abused to steal personal people's information, and I totally agree. I touched on that a bit earlier, but I do think that we could
Mm.
see phishing sites or some other sites come up with autofill fields where you might accidentally click it and fill in that information without realizing it, um, or any number of ways. I don't know how they're prompting to protect this information, but even if they are prompting for consent every time, it's very easy to imagine a lot of people uh, accidentally doing this anyways when this feature exists. So it's definitely a concern, I think, in terms of data security for people that this feature exists.
Yeah, indeed. It does seem to be more of a social engineering issue. I think in a previous article we mentioned on this show, actually, um, I believe there's some controversy with, I believe, a security research team. I forgot if it was from a university or not, and a certain like password manager, potentially one password. And then they got into a bit of an like a bit of a quarrel over whether or not vulnerabilities that involve autofilling passwords should be considered in scope for the security team to implement.
Mhm.
And from what I remember, autofill is such a quality of life issue that a lot of people will refuse to give up on, even if it does implement some security risk. And I believe developers of one password recognize this and is like, yes, there are security vulnerabilities. But at the end of the day, we can't really account for social engineering attacks. If your threat model includes these type of attacks, we don't recommend autofill. And I think that definitely disappointed a lot of people in the forum when that story broke. But then again, it's a bit of a convenience versus privacy like dilemma we have here. You know, it's like autofill is so useful, and so many people trying to make it work, but there are folks that are willing to exploit it through these annoying phishing websites. And is there anything we can really do besides being more diligent what we click on? Would you say, Jonah?
Yeah, I think people who are concerned about this should probably just disable autofill features in general. Autofill is definitely just a trade off between security and convenience. And anytime that you have, I think anytime that you have computers doing anything automatically, that creates a risk of that computer doing something that you didn't expect or intend. And in these cases, it can be dangerous because it can happen so quickly before you can really do anything about it. I could imagine, um, like JavaScript on one of these pages collecting information that you input into a form before you hit submit. So it's not even a matter of like whether you submit that form or not. It could be that data could be collected as soon as you enter it. And this type of autofill uh, just increases that risk, I think. So for the most security conscious people, again, I would just disable autofill in general. But of course, it is a convenient feature and a lot of people like it. And I think um, the best that a lot of people are going to do is just limit the amount of information that gets autofilled. So you can just, I would certainly disable autofilling something like this. You could even consider disabling autofilling passwords depending on how often you use that. If there's less sensitive information that gets autofilled, you could consider leaving that on. It really depends on your use case again, but it's something to keep in mind for sure because autofill features in general, and this feature in particular, they're not inherently safe by any means, and they could present some risk. And so people should just keep that in mind and consider that.
Yeah, thank you so much for answering all these questions. I'm sure there's probably a lot of folks out there confused on whether or not they should enable autofill or not, But I think it's very important to consider all of that and change it based on your threat model, of course. Um, but yeah, Jonah, do you think you have any other like things you probably cover on about this topic?
Yeah, Jordan asked in the chat, do we think because Chrome is adding this, other browsers might follow, like AI ones? I definitely want to see whether this feature gets included in other browsers, but I believe as I've used Brave in the past, they have implemented all of Chrome's autofill features so far. So it wouldn't be surprising to me that this feature makes it into Chromium in general and into other browsers. If it is implemented in AI browsers, like Perplexity's or OpenAI's new browser, that would certainly exacerbate this issue because not only is autofill kind of a dangerous feature to have, like we talked about before, but those browsers, AI browsers, might be automatically autofilling based on websites, and maybe websites will be able to just ask for this information. So yeah, I do think it's a concern that we should look into.
Yeah, definitely. Since it does seem that these autofill features are going to be like downstream to other Chromium-based browsers, it seems like the vast majority of AI browsers, at least the important ones, are based off Chromium. So I think it's only a matter of time before someone is able to exploit this and figure it out. Because even if the information is encrypted um, by Chrome, once it gets autofilled or pasted, that's where I'm most interested in seeing. Like, how will this AI browser see this information? How will they use it? And will it get stored? Hopefully not. I hope that whoever's in the teams developing these AI browsers have at least read into it and actually figure out a way to make sure that these LMs don't actually read these important ID information. But you never know. A lot of folks out here like don't take a lot of things into account. So I think it's a matter of just luck, I guess.
Let's take a look at our last story here. This was also reported by TechCrunch, and the headline is Tinder to use AI to get to know users. Tap into their camera roll photos. So they report Tinder is looking to AI to revitalize its dating app, which has now reported 9 straight quarters of paying subscriber declines as of the third quarter this year. The dating app maker Match Group told investors on Tuesday's earning call that Tinder is testing a feature called Chemistry that will get to know users through questions and, with permission, will access camera roll photos on users' phones to learn more about their interests and personality. Um, They say the feature is already being piloted in New Zealand and Australia, and it's going to be a quote major pillar of Tinder's upcoming 2026 product experience. This is, I think, hugely concerning for all of these users. It's also notable that the people who make Tinder Match Group, they have somewhat of a monopoly in this dating app space in general, and they are actually behind a lot of the dating apps that are out there. And so I would worry that this feature will probably make it into other apps besides Tinder very shortly. I think, I mean, uh, it's very worrying that people would willingly give out all of their photos to be analyzed by these apps. I don't know if that speaks to the current dating scene right now, that people are this desperate that they would give up all of that personal information just to potentially match someone. Kn- I don't even know what to say about this really because it seems to me like such an obviously bad idea. So I don't know who this is for. Uh, do you have any thoughts about this that you've seen,
Uh,
Kevin?
I've been out of the dating market for quite some time, so I have no idea how the majority of people probably deal with this feature. If based on what I do know, though, I do have a feeling that folks will be desperate. Imagine like telling like someone like in the past that and yeah, we'll look at your past photos and make up prompts for you. You can do this and do that, and I would say though, like a lot of folks have no idea like what to do like with the data. It seems pretty scary nowadays. Like we're in a recession. A lot of folks are you know desperate to find love, but I can't afford all these like special like match features. So that's why I'm really confused about. if the general economic standpoint is very against luxury purchases, like a dating app subscription, for example, will they actually gather more customers through and a very intrusive AI looking through all your photos? I don't think so. I don't think that's enough. And I think this is definitely a very desperate, feature by the Match Group to try to claw back some of the revenue that they've lost over the past like few quarters. Um, it's an interesting feature, very privacy unsafe, obviously, but I just feel like it's comes straight out of Black Mirror, we're kind of reaching there, but not necessarily because of genuine genuine to get people matched together. I think it comes out of desperation, in this like modern economy we have where luxuries just as dating are not encouraged right now.
Yeah, I to me, I just feel like the benefits of the benefits to Tinder users of this feature are very unclear to me because I'm not exactly sure what they expect the AI to do with all of this information, especially that it doesn't already do or could do just by asking people questions. Like the example in this TechCrunch episode is that, maybe it could look at photos of yourself hiking or climbing, and then it might match you with somebody who is also outdoorsy. Is that something that they really need access to all of your photos to do, or could they just ask you if you like hiking or the outdoors, and maybe you could check a box and do that yourself? My suspicion, you know, this isn't confirmed in the article, but the only reason that I think this would benefit anybody is because these AI companies really want to collect as much data as possible for training their AI models. I It doesn't say in this article that I saw who they're actually partnering with to provide this AI service, but they're almost certainly not doing it themselves because running local AI models is very expensive and it's still a technical problem. It's not something that companies can just generally do. And so it wouldn't surprise me if Tinder has partnered with OpenAI or a similar AI company like them to provide the service on their behalf. Um, and I would wonder if they've maybe been incentivized by whichever AI company that they've partnered with to enable this feature because um, to me, the clearest beneficiary of this feature is not Tinder or Tinder users, it's whoever is processing all of this data. Because I don't think this will benefit Tinder that much either. Exactly like you said, um, I think that they're declining in revenue because of the general economy right now. I think people just have less to spend on something like this. So I don't think that this is going to save them. So that's the main thing that's confusing to me. I just don't know who this is who this is for, and
Ye-
it seems like it could be
yeah,
AI companies, you know?
it seems like okay, my company's failing. I will say AI just to hopefully make the shareholders happy. It seems like an attempt at that, and
Yeah.
whoever is like processing the data, whatever LLM is doing that, they're definitely being the main success story here. I guess from this article, and I guess something am concerned about is why is AI replacing simple prompts that we just type on an app? If I take photos of my cooking, and the only thing I'm hearing about is cooking, how does that better than just me saying I like cooking on my profile? It's
Right.
just what is going on here? Like is type of cooking important? If I make like a lot of pasta, I'm matching with an Italian person, like I'm saying though, it's like useless features in order to justify increasingly privacy invasive features. That's what's going on right here, and that's what we shouldn't accept this at all.
Yeah, this is just a shockingly dumb feature in my mind. I can't wait to see how this gets abused by people. I think people will come up with creative ways to, um, probably, like, prompt inject the Tinder AI. Maybe they'll add photos to their camera roll that's just, like, text telling the AI what to do. I can see that happening. Um, I can't see this really being a benefit because exactly like you said, Tinder and all of these dating apps, they already have a box to check. Like, check the box if you like hiking, check the box if you like cooking, check the box if you like travel, right? Like, how is this? I don't see what benefit that this is going to have beyond that. Um, so it's very strange, but definitely like we've been saying about AI this whole time, none of these AI providers can keep your data private. That isn't how AI works. So um, yeah, it's very concerning that it's being shoved into all of these apps where it probably doesn't belong at all.
Yeah, indeed. And before we move on to questions, I do want to ask though, if someone does want to, start dating again, for example, but they realize that, apps like Tinder are implementing horrible invasive privacy features that involve an LLM reading through other photos, even if it's opt-in, what do they do? Like, have we have any resources on the website where, someone could potentially do so in a private way? Or should they just simply meet someone in person and touch grass? How would you recommend like this should occur?
Yeah, it's a tricky problem. And all of this online dating stuff in general, I don't have a ton of experience with personally. That's not my preferred method of meeting people. And so, going outside touching grass, I do like that advice. I don't know how realistic that is for people. Definitely let us know if you're a dating app user or like what your experiences are, because it is a question that comes up a lot, I think, in our community in general, just how to do online dating more privately. And to me, it doesn't really seem like there are a lot of great solutions out there right now, which is a bit of a bummer. And I don't know exactly what the best way to fix that is, but definitely something we should look into a bit more, because it that is a question that comes up a lot.
Yeah, and yeah, of course. It seems like a bit of a network effect question because if you do
Yeah.
go out and touch grass, go to a bar and find someone, and then you tell them, "Oh, sorry, I only text you using Signal." Like, it's tough out there, And I definitely do agree that there isn't a lot of information nor really good advice out there. But what we can definitely do is, besides normalizing a lot of these, like, you know, uh, things that we do to safeguard, our data, um, we can also just figure out ways to meet people in real life and still connect with them beyond technology. Because at the end of the day, if you find the right person for you, they'll love you regardless of the things you use, for example. So don't worry about the network effect of it's like no WhatsApp, iMessage. Don't worry about dating apps. Get yourself out there, talk to people. We all will make it eventually. And at the end of the day, it's just these apps should not be collecting this amount of data in the first place. Yet they do, and they're trying to do more and more. And sometimes the only way you can really do about it is to just accept that and get yourself out there. And I think that's probably the most private way to do so. I'd say reverting back to the good old days of the 70s, 80s, and 90s when no smartphones existed. I'd say because that's how people do it back in the day. Apparently, really tough, but hey, that's what I heard from. It worked back in the day. Maybe it can work now. But if you do have any advice, feel free to let us know in the forum. I think a lot of folks definitely learn from you.
Yeah. Last thing I would add really quick, um, about these dating apps in general. Back in June, wrote a bit about dating apps and some of these privacy problems. I mean, this is a whole nother level, but I think people have had privacy concerns about these dating apps for quite some time. So definitely check this out in our articles, if you're interested. It was written during Pride Month, but I think it does have a lot of application for anyone who's using these online dating apps, because it really covers a lot of how much data these dating apps actually collect and how they can leave your data exposed. So I would just check that out if you're interested in reading a bit more about this topic.
And it's an amazing read, I'd say. Like, I think regardless of who you are, like the amount of information you voluntarily post on your profile could be used against you, and that information could definitely be used to like harm you. So definitely keep in mind if you do accept the security and privacy drawbacks of using a dating app, to be very careful what you post there for sure.
I think that covers all of the regular news topics that we wanted to talk about. So we can look at a couple stories on the form before we get into the Q&A here. Were there any forum threads that you've seen in our community that were popular this week or that you wanted to highlight on the show, Kevin?
Oh yes. We can start with the first one. Given if we have enough time, um, this one thing I've discovered was session messenger. Um, in the past, of course, there's been a lot of controversy with a lot of security researchers critiquing aspects of its encryption model. And while we don't officially recommend session, they are welcome to be on our forum to talk. And and I've discovered another user who's trying to critique a few of their features as well, and which also elicited a response officially from session. So this user here, which will not identify out of privacy concerns, but if you're interested, you can definitely go on the form itself to read it. Um, Essentially, this user is worried about an upcoming change to Session Messenger regarding file attachments. Apparently, this new scheme of encryption is deterministic, meaning that the same user is uploading an identical attachment results in an identical encrypted copy. And this person, while not an official cryptographer, we probably shouldn't take this person at face value, unless, of course, Jonah, you believe that they're right. Um, they mentioned like this example with using the classic Alice and Bob example in a lot of like academic literature and classes on the topic of encryption. So Alice and Bob are talking, and Eve can capture encrypted file blobs between Alice and Bob. Let's say Alice and Bob are doing insider trading. Eve has figured this out. Yay. And Alice covertly uses one image to signal to Bob buying stocks and another one to signal selling stocks. Under deterministic encryption, Eve can, for every new image sent by Alice, tell apart which image is which and predict stocks herself. This attack is passive. It can also be performed online on captured blobs to extract information from passing conversations. And and this user mentioned that this fact could be exploited in this scenario because Eve can tell when a file has been encrypted. However, Alice and Bob assume the opposite when they're relying on their encryption. To summarize it in short, conversation secrecy is dependent on transparent encryption and the number of users in this network. Um, of course, I'm going to skip past a lot of what the users mentioned. If you want more detail, definitely do read their posts. But oh, Keith Jeffries from Session has responded officially, and they mentioned that Session is not going to use deterministic file encryption code path for attachments, videos, so on and so forth, which are sent and uploaded conversations, and that this code path will only be used for profile images. Um, so you may see here that this user has definitely made like a few mistakes here, but I'm not really too sure, Jonah. Like, what do you think? I'd say, can you better explain deterministic encryption? Do you feel like Session has made another mistake?
Yeah, let me just I think it's safe to put Key Jeffrey's uh response on the screen. So I'll just show that really quick. They said that, like you said, they're not going to use it um, for attachments that are in conversations. They're only going to use it for profile images. I'm not exactly sure what the benefit of that is necessarily. I haven't looked too much into this session feature or how they're using it exactly. It seems like it's not as much of a concern in this particular case as um, the user initially thought it would be because it's not going to be used for attachments. But we've talked about deterministic encryption and some of the problems that it causes before. Most notably, I think, with iCloud Advanced Data Protection, any photos that you upload to iCloud Photos and files that you upload to iCloud Drive are protected with a very similar scheme where basically if two people have identical files, they're going to be encrypted uh, in the same way that'll in a way that allows Apple to deduplicate those files and save on storage, basically. Um, it's probably reasonable for some services to use deterministic encryption because, at large scale it has a cost, but there is a huge privacy concern with it because there's multiple attacks depending on the type of file being uploaded where somebody else could potentially find out what files you have or find out some sensitive information within a file depending on how that file is structured. I've talked a bit about that on the forum in our iCloud discussion if people want more technical details, but at the end of the day, it's not as private as re-encrypting everything with a key that only the original user has. So there's certainly privacy concerns with this. As far as session goes, um, we don't recommend Session already. It's not been our favorite messenger for a while because they don't implement security features that are standard in other messengers now, like perfect forward secrecy, for example.
That's pretty important.
Since they switched from using the Signal protocol to their own encryption method, basically. So um, it has a lot of fans, but it's probably not our top choice for Messenger. And if you want a messenger with improved security, um, that doesn't require an identifier like Signal requires your phone number for registration right now, you could always use SimpleX. I think that's probably the best alternative to Session right now, that people might want to look into. Um, but yeah, I don't know how exactly this is going to impact Session. It seems like this particular case isn't a big deal, but overall, Session has concerns that I would think about. So it's still not something I would personally use myself.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying all that. Yeah, I think like there's definitely like a lot of information needs to be like explained about deterministic encryption, and I think like on I feel like everyone definitely benefited from just like even like if they just propose like potential problem, it's great to not only answer questions but also on the forum learn new things. And we really want to encourage people on the forum to never stop asking questions and raising doubts because without this level of community involvement, do we know that our products we're using are safe? You know, so definitely keep up the good work. Congratulations, user, for like getting yourselves out there, and hope that we do more work. Yeah, do we want to go over the next form update, or do you think we should answer some questions now?
Sure. I think it shouldn't take that long. Why don't you bring it up here, and I'll send a link to it in the chat for people reading along.
Yeah, of course. Yes. So, um, a lot of really good news I hear for Ente here. A lot of people in the forum are really excited to see that Ente has completed a CERN sponsored audit. And Ente, as you may or may not know, they're a photo management software or a phone gallery, essentially. Um, that essentially is trying to be an end-to-end encrypted alternative to iCloud Photos and Google Photos. And there has been a lot of missing gaps so far between um, you know regular apps that manage your photos and also more privacy conscious ways of managing your photos. A lot of things we like recommend on our forum, for example, they tend to alternate between self-hosted ways of managing your photos and, of course, end-to-end encrypted solutions. And Ente is one of them. Ente specifically, though, has both the server-side code and infrastructure code, audited by a team of 5 researchers from the German cybersecurity firm Cure53 over a period of 2 weeks as part of a CERN-sponsored audit. No data integrity issues were found, and 12 of the 15 security-related issues were fixed by the Ente team during the audit itself. The audit covered all the apps, photos, auth, and outcoming locker, so it's the same code infrastructure powers the entire platform. You can read Cure 53 summary on their website and their full report on our website as well. And of course, now these changes are now ready in their latest Docker image. And I guess a lot of people on the forum were very curious about Ente Locker. And apparently, based on like just reading the code itself, it's essentially like a new form of cloud storage, kind of like Proton Drive, which I'm really excited for to see. Ente is a new player, and they have definitely made a lot of like news by collaborating with a lot of services like Kuta. Am I right?
Yeah, they've been. I think I just saw an announcement from NT about Notes Nook as well. They partnered in a similar way where these different privacy companies are kind of partnering up to give discounts if you purchase from more than one of these companies, which I think is a cool initiative to have. It's definitely great to see privacy companies working together to get people to switch to private alternatives rather than trying to compete with each other. Because I think we see with certain privacy companies, I think a misconception that the privacy market is only so big and they need to fight for um, like their slice of the pie, so to speak. But in reality, I think that the market for all of these tools, I think, is much broader than people would expect. And really, to expand to more audiences, what companies need to do is do things like what NT is doing, partner with other companies on these bundles and increase marketing. And hopefully, we're also contributing that as well, just increasing awareness of privacy in general, because there's appealing features of all of these apps to a lot of people. What we see a lot is that privacy apps end up being, less bloated, and they end up being more convenient and more streamlined and more feature filled because they are building things that people actually want, and they don't have to insert AI or advertisements or other stuff into these apps and worsen the experience. So not only are you improving your privacy and security when you switch to a lot of the apps that we recommend on our website, but you're getting a more convenient and better overall experience as well. So it's good that they're working together, and it's great that CERN sponsored this audit of NT. I think it's really good to see these apps being audited, and I didn't get a chance to read through this entire report yet, unfortunately, but I took a look at the scope, which is usually the main thing you'd want to look at in these reports because sometimes a lot of things get excluded, um, and so they're not tested at all in the audits. But it seems like the scope of this audit in particular was pretty comprehensive across their entire platform, which is definitely a good sign. And the fact that they have fixed all of these uh, issues, I believe they fixed most of them during the audit. I think they've fixed the rest, but I guess I don't see that, so I'd have to can double check and see whether they fixed some of them afterwards to be sure. But either way, I think these audits are a useful tool for us to evaluate whether the people developing these apps are good at what they're doing and whether they're capable of implementing a secure app. And hopefully this leads to an improvement of NT overall. I think NT is a cool product to use. I haven't used it too much, but I just re-downloaded it again this week, actually, unrelated to this, but I wanted to test it out, and I think I might switch to it for photo backups. But we'll see. It, it's it yeah, it's good that they did this, and it's cool that CERN is supporting this, and I'm interested to see if they will sponsor audits of other apps as well. But I don't know if that's an initiative they're going to do.
Yeah, it appears that CERN they really like use NT personally. And there's actually a lot of discourse about whether or not it's ethical for you know security researchers or the funders of said security research to really enjoy one product or the other and to sponsor them, and it may cause a lot of potential bias here. Do you feel like that is a concern though, or do you feel like generally speaking like security audits are good regardless though, and do you believe that they are acting in the best faith for folks?
Yeah, I think, the security audits being done by these independent firms is good. Cure 53 has done a lot of great audits of other services. I've seen some Cure 53 audits that also aren't so great. Typically, that does come down to like I was saying, the scope of the audit. The company that hired them excluded a lot of things that we wanted to see tested, and so there's not much Cure 53 can do if if they're not allowed to test certain things, right? And so you can't use it as like an indicator that this service is perfect. It's not a silver bullet, right? But it does provide some useful information about these services. Um, and while it's not a requirement, especially because these audits can be quite expensive, I think it is very cool to see CERN or other organizations sponsoring these, especially for open source projects, which um, oftentimes don't have the resources to do this on their own.
Yeah, and it appears that CERN, like they have a lot of their alumni or people currently using like currently work for CERN, like they tend to like gear more towards like these privacy oriented products. Like, Andy Yan, for example. I believe he worked at CERN before, right? And they ended up founding Proton later.
Yeah, that is where Proton kind of originated from. Indian and some of Proton's other founders started at CERN and built this tool. So
Hmm.
so they have been a name, I think, in the privacy space for a while.
Yeah, that's honestly quite fascinating. I would love to see, like where did this pipeline kind of falls. Is it just more so like, yes, like they work at such a very prestigious like laboratory, and then they end up just happening to liking these privacy oriented products, or I don't know. I just feel like this like connection is very interesting to me. Like people at CERN really love using these type of products, and I don't know. Like I think maybe it's coincidence, or maybe there's like a lot more stronger
Yeah.
characteristic that's kind of driving this. But anyways, I think it's really good proof of that though.
Well, I would just say I think, the smart people at CERN, they wanna use the best tools possible, and usually the private
Of
ones are the
course, of
best.
course. Remember, CERN sponsored. Use their product.
Um, why don't we get into the Q&A here, actually? Um, I don't know if we got any questions on our form, I can check that now, but,
Yes, we
we
do.
can take a look at the
Um,
YouTube chat as well. But, yeah, if you see a question on our forum, let's start out with that.
yes. So, also, I want to just reiterate for the folks watching our live stream right now, um, the people who do comment in the live stream and either through the forum or in the YouTube chat, your name will be publicized. Just fair warning. We did have the disclaimer on the form itself, so this user has consented. Um, the user going by the name of Kistu stated, "Will it be hard for EU folks to leave questions during live streams 11 p.m. on a Friday?" Oof. I may have a few, but not sure the exact topics that will be covered. Yeah. Didn't we have a bit of a time change like recently?
Yeah, I mean, the time that this live stream started at is gonna be the time that these streams start at for the foreseeable future. Daylight savings time is always annoying twice a year when the time changes and throws everything off, but I think even our last time wasn't great for the EU either. Part of the problem is, with such an international team of people, um, finding a time that works for everyone around the world is very challenging, and I think the EU definitely did get, um they pulled the short straw on this one because I mean the two of us were in the US. Jordan's in Australia, of course, and the person who will be working on this in the future, since we announced that new hire, they're in the US as well. So finding a time that works for everyone is challenging, and I don't think we're going to be able to improve things for the EU, unfortunately, just because we need to wrap in Jordan, in a lot of cases in Australia is literally like the other side of the world, right? So you got to make a compromise somewhere. But you can always well, I can't even speak. You can always catch these episodes on your favorite podcast app, or you can catch the video on demand replay on YouTube and PeerTube after the fact, and we email this all out. And so I don't think you'll miss out too much if you're in the EU. If you're in the EU and you want to get a question answered during the show, we pre-announce these live streams on Wednesdays every week on our forum. So you can join our forum and ask the question there, and we will get it answered, and then you can check the recording after for that. That's what I probably recommend. Either that or stay up late and chat with us. Up to you.
Yeah, you can fall asleep to us. Like maybe like we could be like a little bit of an ASMR or something, or I don't know. Like I'll be honest with you, like given the fact that I know some people who do sleep like 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. It's definitely possible for some folks to be like watching from us live, but I have a feeling that most of you will prioritize other things as well at that time period. So no worries, we can make our live stream. It's okay. I'll make sure to respond to this user on the form itself so to be notified of our answer. But of course, you can always just skip ahead to the final recorded video of it, probably around, let's say, at least for Europeans, around 12 something. Maybe usually we answer questions near the end of the live stream. So if it's a 2 hour long video, maybe like skip past hour or so, and then you probably get to your question at that time. Yes, but Jonah, do we have any questions or comments from the YouTube?
Yeah, let me take a look at the YouTube chat now. And in the meantime, yeah, if anyone has a question for us that they want to get answered, about anything that we talked about or anything at all related to privacy, this is the best time to ask, and we can try to get that done. You can ask on the forum thread for this live stream or here on YouTube, and we'll get it answered.
All right. I'm just gonna look through the live stream. So, Jordan, since that they're not, currently hosting, they've been very active. on the chat. So thank you so much. Um, yeah, Jordan's first question. Maybe this feature could be also abused to steal people's information. Yep, that's true. I think we answered that before, actually. Let me skip ahead. Uh,
Recent question. This is also from Jordan. Did we see that SimpleX is working on a cryptocurrency NFT integration? um,
oh,
yeah,
I'm confused by that. What's going on? Like, it's either like an NFT sponsored by them, but it's not an NFT sponsored by them. Like, is the quote unquote token different from the NFT? I'm confused.
yeah.
But Jonah, do you know? Can you give any like contextualization on what's going on? Because to be frank, I read through everything and I'm confused myself.
So SimpleX appears to be working on a way to for simple X server operators to monetize that work and potentially collect payments from people who use their servers, which I think is an important question to ask when it comes to these decentralized services like SimpleX. Somebody has to ultimately run um, something at the end of the day to keep these running reliably, and so compensation might make some sense the way that they're going about it. I don't know if it makes a ton of sense in my mind, but the plan seems to be to introduce some sort of cryptocurrency token that can be exchanged for payments and that can be obtained in the app and that can be used to pay server operators. And then separately, they release an NFT, but I don't think um, they're doing that to kind of cash in on the NFT craze. I think it's a bit late for that, anyways. I don't know if anyone really does NFTs anymore, but
Hashtag
um,
Web3.
but this NFT in particular, it's used to access the test net for this new SimpleX token. So it's basically just a ticket to get into whenever they launch this. I don't know whether I don't know what this will actually look like. I don't think the test net for their new cryptocurrency token is launched yet. Um, so what their plan is, it's not exactly clear to me, and I don't know um, what all of the advantages are above traditional payment methods or donation methods. A goal of theirs, they said, is to make this a decentralized service. But, I'm not sure if cryptocurrency is necessarily the right way to go about that, or if they need to run their own token as opposed to using an established one, but maybe they do, and I think we just need to kinda see where that all ends up, but it seems I don't know, the whole situation seems strange to me. I think that's probably a lot of people's thoughts when it comes to any of this cryptocurrency stuff. It's a bit
Yeah,
of a red flag, right?
it is, yes. I mean, I know that what Jordan mentioned in the chat was that Session tried to do some with Oxen. I haven't really know about this specifically, but is it a trend right now, or do you feel like it's just more so like people being very idealistic with what they want to do? You know, the whole, oh, let's have these privacy preserving tokens to be used as payment. It's a very idealist thing until you realize, oh wait, it has a lot of horrible connotations associated with it. Unfortunately, so once again, a bit of a mixed bag, right?
Yeah, the concerning thing to me about, Simplex's system is that they appear to be wanting to build this on the Ethereum network, which isn't private by default. I would be concerned about, people potentially being profiled because of based on, like, their use of SimpleX because these transactions might be public on the blockchain. I don't know how they plan to address all of that. Session, on the other hand, they do have Oxen. Session has always been kind of a Web3 app, and they've been into cryptocurrency from the get go. Um, the cryptocurrency aspect of it, I don't think matters to most people, which is probably why it's not used too much. But I do. So I don't know the specifics of how that all works, honestly, on Session's side of things. Again, since they're not an app we recommend anyways, I haven't looked too deeply into it, but they've definitely been into crypto for quite a while.
Mm. Yeah, indeed. Do definitely did notice that. Well, yeah, Simple X is recommended by us, and I do want to like pay some attention. More so a question actually on. I'd say, do you feel like a lot of these like projects, like Simple X, they're newer, they're still trying to be established. Do you feel like a lot is prevented with like a more clear press release, for example, or like maybe a more of a public relations team of some sort to actually like kind of manage it? Because I feel like it's totally tough out there when you're trying to do something that's positive, but it ends up being misinterpreted entirely. This is definitely a pattern I noticed with a lot of the tools that are recommended. There's a lot of well-meaning people. I'm trying to produce amazing products to protect our privacy, but it just it does not executed well, at least in terms of the initial communication to the public.
Yeah, this is definitely, I think, an overall issue with open source projects generally. A lot of them tend to have these PR issues, or they don't communicate super effectively. Exactly what their mission is or what they're trying to do. SimpleX themselves, they're no strangers to controversy. Really, I know they get into a lot of arguments and discussions on like Twitter before, and they've made some controversial decisions. The last major one I think was when they accepted VC funding, and they had a lot to say about that. So I don't know what their general strategy is, and I think people still use Simplex anyway, so it might not make a huge difference. But um, yeah, I think it leaves a lot of questions out there for people to wonder. I think that's the general sentiment that I've seen in the forum discussions on the Privacy Guides forum about the Simplex NFT and their venture into crypto. People are just kind of wondering, what's going on, and I totally agree that they probably should have addressed some of those questions more fully in their announcement.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. It's an unfortunate situation overall, but I think we can definitely wish the best for Simple X and for future endeavors, of course. And still an amazing product, so far. And we are really excited to see like how the project definitely develops as time goes by. Um, just looking through the YouTube chat, Wake's logo is joining us since 4:30 a.m. at their time to check our stream up. Oh, wait, that's so sweet. Thank you so much for joining us. Like, we're really glad for you to be active. And if you aren't already involved like with the forum, definitely do talk there as well. But we're really excited for you to join us tonight. Um, Vonnegut Rosewater says, I was sure hoping Google's monopoly ruling would have resulted in more significant concessions, changes, breaking ups. Yeah, like it's complicated. I think we talked about this so many times. Actually, like the same, not the same, multiple DOJ cases against Google, and we're so excited to see them, get broken up. And it only really resulted in very minor changes, of course, and that's something that I really want to emphasize when more lawsuits are filed against Google that do reach that trust level. Um, we don't really know that this will ever lead to Google breaking up. I feel like Google and other technologies are synonymous with the American empire. Like America extends its influence through their tech companies, of course, and it's very imperative of the U.S. to actually protect them abroad and protect their interests abroad. So I would have never have imagined Google formally breaking up into a separate Chrome company and a separate search engine company and a Maps company, so on and so forth. But what is more realistic, however, is that there'll be minor changes to give other players a chance. And the most ironic thing about this is that the recent ruling by the U.S. court, the Supreme Court, on the Chrome itself may actually end up leading to um, AI-based browsers getting more of a leg up. I believe that Google must share search engine data with these AI browser startups, for example, Perplexity and OpenAI. And since these companies are basing their AI browsers off Chromium, well, it's obvious to see that this will only really benefit AI browsers, not people like us. Like, do we ever imagine like Google like breaking up whatever benefiting Firefox? No, actually, and ironically, end up benefiting AI browsers, which is confusing because that's all we want, right? So I
Yeah,
guess we're in a bit of a picky situation, right? Like we are stuck with Google, and
it's
if they ever break up, we get a worse like enemy.
It's very yeah, it's not a great situation. I think a lot of people when these antitrust lawsuits were really going on, they were hopeful that we would see a lot more change, but not even just with Google, but beyond that, in terms of the industry as a whole, we definitely don't see changes. And in fact, we see companies trying to follow that path and kind of ignore these rulings, and it doesn't seem like anything is really being done about any of that. So it is yeah, it is a bit disappointing that those rulings didn't really result in any changes. I don't know if that'll change in the future, but it seems a bit unlikely to me. Um some of these companies are just too big and too integrated that splitting them up, doesn't make a ton of business sense. It's a totally different situation now compared to 100 years ago when it comes to monopolies because realistically, a product like Google Chrome can't really survive on the open market standalone without being subsidized by Google's other businesses like AdSense. And the same probably could apply to um, most of Google services. Like they all rely on each other, and the only reason that Google makes money in the first place is because they um, collect so much data and are so privacy invasive, and they figured out a way to monetize that across all of their apps. And so splitting it up and just looking at a single application doesn't it doesn't make a lot of business sense, and that's why I think we haven't really seen these changes. But it's not an ideal situation either. So it's yeah, it's not great.
Yeah, I remember like there was a joke that was told to me once. Um, every time you make a Google search, you're essentially subsidizing all their employees' fun little hobby projects until one of them eventually blows to be an important service in the future. Like I believe that's how Google Maps was founded. People wanted to create a fun little map software, or someone who wanted to create a fun social media, out of with Google Plus and all that, ended up blowing up because of fun based off funding from Google Search. So every time you see like a non-search related product, be it a Pixel or Google Maps, so on and so forth. You're really just funding like it yourself every time you make a search. So think about that next time when you do like decide to use Google Chrome occasionally just to make a search, because at the end of the day, the only thing that Google cares about is advertising and profit through Google search. And that's the only way the company can survive. Anything that threatens that is an existential threat towards Google themselves, because every single other service they make is not as profitable at all. It cannot survive by its own.
I think that kind of wraps up everything I've seen. So this might be the last chance to get a question in. Do you see any more questions that people wanted us to cover during the show, Kevin, or should we
Yes.
wrap this up a bit?
I'm just gonna do a bit of a last minute check on everything so far, but I think like that's pretty much all of the pretty much like the questions that we got that are on topic, of course.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. We will probably wrap this up here, I think. As usual, all of the updates from this week in privacy, we share them on the blog in our newsletter every week. So get subscribed to our email newsletter if you want links to all the stuff that we talked about and some other insights that we've written down about the things that we talked about in the show. We also uh, have an audio only version of this show that will be going up live soon. But you can catch this episode and all of the past episodes on your favorite podcast app. Pretty much any podcast app. If you search for this, you can find it. Otherwise, if you go to our homepage at privacyguides.org, you can find links to a lot of different podcast platforms that you can follow. And of course, this recording is available on YouTube for future watching as well. Um, Thank you all again for watching. This show is made possible by our very generous members and everyone who has donated and supported Privacy Guide so far. So if you like the work that we are doing and you want to help out not only us, but also our staff writer, M, and Jordan, and everyone else who has contributed to Privacy Guides, definitely visit our website and consider making a donation. You can click the red heart in the top right of any page, and you'll find a link to all of that. Um, I think that's about it. Thank you so much again, Kevin, for joining me today. I think this was a really great show, and we had a lot of good insights for people. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you, Jonah, for like hosting this, of course. And with Jordan being absent right now, like it's really nice to see this like, live stream still being pop up week by week. So yeah,
Absolutely. Well,
excited to see us go week by week.
have a good weekend, everyone, and Kevin, and we will talk to you all again next week. See ya.
All right, goodbye, everyone.